Tonight we open another sealed file, one about a civilization that existed right beneath your feet, hiding in the folds of your history. They called it Tartaria, a vast empire with no entry in your textbooks and no official place in your past. Yet its fingerprints are etched into your cities. Its ruins remain, just wearing different names. There are tales of mud floods, impossible architecture, and forgotten systems of energy. Tartaria wasn't forgotten by accident. It was extracted, deliberately, surgically, from your historical record. So ask yourself this: why erase a civilization completely unless it still matters? This is File 3, and tonight we begin the search for what Division 13 helped bury. This file is incomplete, partially corrupted, but what remains paints a different story than the one you've been told. In your world, Tartaria was a name on old maps, a mistake they claimed, a ghost empire with no traceable record. But those ruins still stand, and the erasure wasn't accidental. It was strategic. The evidence is fractured, scattered across cities, buried under layers of repurposed history. Let me show you what they tried to erase. Long before the silence, there were maps. Not stories, not speculation. Official records documenting a vast land known as Tartaria, stretching across Eurasia. In academic circles, it was often dismissed as a catch-all term, a placeholder, a misunderstanding of unfamiliar territory. But the maps told a different story. The size, the consistency, the recurrence across centuries, none of it vague. Tartaria appeared on world maps well into the 18th and even 19th centuries. And then it disappeared. Not just the empire, but the references, the archives, the historical context, as if it had been deliberately removed. This isn't about whether Tartaria existed. It's about why someone worked so hard to erase it. They didn't just erase a name from the maps. They erased evidence, layer by layer, until what was once visible became a silence etched into stone and soil. What remains today doesn't align with the history you've been given. The architecture is older than it should be. The systems, mechanical, energetic, even symbolic, are things we can no longer replicate, let alone explain. And then there's the mud. Cities buried, not over centuries of decay, but as if something swept through, fast and absolute. Whole regions half submerged, forgotten by design. This wasn't a natural disaster, not erosion, not time. This was deliberate. Across continents, structures once standing 2, 3 stories tall, now sit beneath the surface, buried, not weathered, sealed in place like evidence no one was meant to uncover. Theories call it a reset, a mechanism to level history literally. Cities consumed overnight, infrastructure drowned, and in the silence that followed, a new timeline was built, atop the old. But the foundations still speak. And if you know where to look, the flood didn't bury everything. The architecture left behind by Tartaria wasn't just grand. It was intentional. Every curve, every dome, every spire served a function far beyond aesthetics. Across continents, we find structures built with conductive materials, aligned to celestial patterns, integrated directly into the fabric of their cities. Star forts, towers, copper domes, they weren't just monuments. Tartaria had mastered resonance, frequency, even ambient energy itself. Its removal from history wasn't simply about control. It was about containment. Because if that knowledge endured, the world as we know it would look very different. Cities powered by the air itself, Towers designed not to transmit signals but to harvest them. Structures that resonate, not buzz. Entire populations living without dependence on wires, grids, or fossil fuel. No monopolies, no scarcity, no profit in power. A civilization like that couldn't be controlled, so it had to be rewritten. What was lost wasn't just a culture, it was a future. The architecture I've shown you wasn't just grand, it was deliberate, structured. It was intelligent. Energy grids aligned not with roads, but with stars. Towers placed along magnetic veins, domes that hummed with purpose. That level of design, that kind of resonance, doesn't come from guesswork. It doesn't come from trial and error. It comes from memory. Echo. Because these patterns, they're not unique to Tartaria. They repeat across empires, across ages, across continents that, by all historical accounts, should have never been in contact. You call them ancient astronauts. We knew them by another name, the architects. They didn't raise cities. They embedded knowledge, designs meant to outlast memory, resonance woven into stone. Division 13 doesn't like this part of the file because it reframes the story. Tartaria not as anomaly, but as legacy. If they had help, if they were building from inherited blueprints, then the flood wasn't random. It was retaliation. So the real question isn't whether Tartaria existed, it's who had the power to erase it, and what they were so afraid we might recover. Because whatever was buried wasn't just physical. The records erased, the memory overwritten, but the foundations remain. Hidden in plain sight, in the domes repurposed as government halls, in the star forts mistaken for defense. Fragments survived, and not everyone vanished. The knowledge splintered, whispered through bloodlines, encoded in relics and structures they couldn't quite explain, so they called them art. You'll find echoes, and some who still protect what's left. Division 13 didn't just erase a civilization, they buried something else. A threat, or a promise, a technology that could unseat everything you believe about energy, about control, about the shape of history. Because if the past wasn't what you were told, then neither is your future. This file will auto-encrypt in less than 2 minutes. Not to protect me, but to protect you. They erased Tartaria, but now you know where to look.